Hello friends, enjoy this relaxing moment with Valentino Stories. Remember to subscribe and share your thoughts in the comment section and generously hit the like button because it means a lot to us. Please relax and enjoy as we dive in the story. Maduka's feet shuffled through the soft, dry dust of the village road. Each step stirred tiny clouds around his worn sandals. In one hand he held a gourd half filled with warm palm wine, its sweet smell floating up to his nose. The night air was heavy and still, broken only by the croaking of distant frogs and the rustle of dry leaves. Maduka's mind felt as wobbly as his walk. With each sip of palm wine, his head grew lighter and his laughter louder. A group of children ran along the side of the road, their bare feet kicking up little puffs of dust. They chased one another, their laughter bright against the darkness. When they saw Maduka, they stopped and pointed. "Look how drunk he is," one whispered. "He will fall," another giggled. But Maduka heard only the echo of his own joy. He lifted the gourd high above his head and threw his head back to laugh at the night sky. "Leave me alone," he shouted, his voice echoing off the mud walls of the houses. "I'm greeting the moon." He tilted the gourd so the pale liquid rippled under the moonlight. To him, it looked like a golden trophy, shining brighter than any prize in the village square. Suddenly, a shape by the old market gate caught his eye. He froze mid-step. There, standing as still as a statue, was a young girl. She wore a torn school dress that hung loosely on her thin frame. The dress was once bright, but now it looked dull and dirty in the moon's glow. Her hair was long and tangled, falling in dark strands around her face. Maduka blinked, then staggered closer, the gourd nearly tipping in his hand. "Little one," he slurred, trying to sound kind though his words felt heavy in his mouth. "Go home. Night is for grown folk." He took another gulp of palm wine, hoping the warmth in his belly would calm his nerves. But instead, his heart began to pound. The girl lifted her head. Her skin was pale, almost shining like a white stone in the night. Her eyes met his, wide and deep, but they did not blink. Maduka wanted to speak, to ask her why she was out so late, but no words came into his mind. His mouth opened, and he tried to call out, but only a small, hollow sound escaped, like wind through a broken reed. The air around them grew colder. Maduka felt a strange breeze swirl at his feet, carrying the scent of wet clay and river water. He remembered the stream that ran at the edge of the village, where the water glittered under the moon. But this scent was different. He felt it in his chest, small droplets of fear mixing with the palm wine's warmth. He stumbled forward, almost dropping the gourd. It slipped, spun in slow motion, and hit the ground with a sharp crack. Wine splashed across the dust, soaking into the dry earth. Maduka bent to pick it up, but the girl stood motionless, watching. He could not look away. Her eyes held a sadness that reached into his bones. For a moment, the world quieted. The children's laughter faded. The croaking frogs paused. Maduka could hear only his own breath and the beating of his heart. He tried to speak again, but his tongue felt heavy. Who are you?" he managed, voice shaking. The girl did not answer. Instead, she stepped forward, her bare feet silent on the dust. Maduka took a shaky step back. The moon above seemed to glow brighter, as if it were watching them, waiting. He heard his own heart whisper, this night would change everything. Finally, the girl lifted one thin hand and pointed toward the road behind him. Maduka glanced over his shoulder, but saw nothing, just the empty path and rows of dark huts. When he looked back at her, she was closer. The scent of wet clay was stronger now, pressing against his nose. His breath caught. Maduka swallowed hard. The palm wine, once warm and comforting, now burned in his throat. He realized, with sudden clarity, that he was not merely drunk, he was afraid. Fear settled in his chest like a heavy stone. He wanted to run, but his legs would not obey. The girl's lips moved, but no sound came out. Yet somehow, Maduka felt he heard her voice inside his mind, soft and urgent, "Help me." His stomach turned. He knew, deep down, that she was not an ordinary child who had wandered from home. She was something else, a silent visitor from the darkness, calling him into a world he did not understand. Maduka closed his eyes for a moment, trying to clear his head. When he opened them, the girl was gone. The road was empty again, the moon bright and still. The broken gourd lay at his feet, wine staining the earth. He felt the emptiness around him more keenly than ever. He bent to pick up the gourd's handle, pressing it into his palm as if it were an anchor. The children's voices returned, muffled but insistent. Maduka forced himself to stand and walked on, taking unsteady steps toward home. Behind him, He thought he heard the softest whisper on the wind, a voice carried from the darkness, "Remember me." In the silence of his own fear, Maduka understood that this night would never be the same. The moon shone down, indifferent and bright, as he staggered away, haunted by a vision no one else could see. And in his heart, he knew that the quiet of the night had been broken forever. Maduka crawled through the low doorway of his compound just as the first light of dawn began to color the sky. His legs could barely carry him, and he collapsed onto the cool stone corridor outside his wife's room. The rough floor pressed against his cheek, and for a moment, he lay still, too tired to even think. Not long after, a splash of cold water woke him. Maduka jerked upright, blinking against the sudden shock. Standing before him was Nkechi, his wife, her arms crossed and her eyes filled with frustration. In one hand she held a clay pot, its contents now dripping from his hair to the floor. "Useless man," she scolded, her voice sharp in the early light. "All you know is drinking. You sleep on the cold stones while I work to feed us." Maduka opened his mouth to apologize, but no words came. He groaned softly, rubbing his face and muttering, "Maybe it was all a dream. Maybe last night's madness was only in my head." Nkechi snatched the clay pot away and stood to leave. "Eat your food," she said, pointing toward a small wooden table by the door. "Then maybe your head will clear. I have chores to finish." He watched her go and sat up, the echo of her footsteps mingling with his pounding heart. On the table was a simple meal, boiled yams and a small pot of pepper soup. The steam curled in the cool air, and Maduka stared at it as if it were a puzzle. He picked up a yam, but just as he lifted it to his mouth, a gentle voice stopped him. "I won't harm you," the voice whispered. It was soft, sorrowful, and it seemed to come from all around him. Maduka's hand froze in mid-air. He looked up and saw her standing a step away, the same thin girl in the torn school dress, her pale face framed by tangled hair. Her dark eyes met his, full of a strange, urgent light. He dropped the yam and scrambled backward, landing on his back with a thud. His heart pounded so fiercely that he was sure it would burst from his chest. He pushed himself up on shaking arms and stared at her, stunned. Who are you?" he whispered, voice trembling. He tried to speak more loudly, but it felt as if the sound were trapped in his throat. "I need your help," she finally said, her voice soft inside his mind. The words were clear, even though her mouth made no sound. Maduka blinked, his fear mingling with confusion. Everything inside him wanted to run, to flee from this ghostly visitor and hide in his hut. But he could not move. It was as if her need had frozen him in place. My wife will think I am mad," he stammered, glancing toward the doorway when Nkechi had disappeared. "She already calls me useless." The girl nodded, her dark eyes sad. "I know." She hovered there, silent but present, waiting for him to understand. Maduka opened his mouth once more, determined despite his fear. "If you want my help, tell me what I must do," he said, forcing himself to speak firmly. His voice echoed softly against the walls. The ghost took a small step closer, her feet whisper quiet on the stones. "Listen closely," she murmured. "I will show you what happened to me. Then you must decide if you will stand with the living, or remain silent." Maduka's chest tightened. He felt a surge of both dread and duty. The sun climbed higher, but the corridor felt colder than before. He nodded slowly, knowing that no matter how terrified he was, he could not turn away. The dead had found him, and now their voices would guide his fate. The pale girl touched Maduka's arm, her hand cold as river water. Her dark eyes held both sorrow and anger as she began to speak. "My name is Amora," she whispered, her voice echoing softly in Maduka's mind. "I died here, by this very river, almost a year ago." Maduka swallowed hard, his heart hammering in his chest. He remembered the riverbank, where children sometimes fished and women washed clothes. He thought of its gentle flow under the sun. Now, in the moon's silver light, that same river had become the site of a terrible crime. Amora's story unfolded steadily, each word clear and simple. She had fetched water before dawn, as she did every morning. The bucket slid from her hand at the river's edge, the wood cracking against the stones. She bent to pick it up when rough hands seized her from behind. Fear had flared in her chest like burning coal. "He was there," she said, pointing beyond the hut's wall as if Chief Chukwuma himself stood before them. Chukwuma, the priest's favorite boy, watched me at the river. He said my life was special because I was still a virgin. My blood, he believed, would make his charm stronger. Maduka's stomach churned at the thought. He pictured the proud young chief from the council meetings, smiling in his fine robes. No hint of brutality showed on Chukwuma's face, only respect and honor. Yet behind the mask lay a man hungry for power. Amora continued, "They dragged me through the mud and tied my wrists to a tree. The chief priest prepared his fetishes and beads. He chanted over me, calling on the spirits to accept my sacrifice." She shivered, though no breeze stirred the air. The chants were slow at first, then grew loud, like thunder in my ears. Maduka's hand went to his mouth to still a sudden cry. The simplicity of her words made the horror more real. He could almost hear the priest's voice rising in the night, feel the rough bark beneath Amora's back. "Then they killed me," she said, her face pale but steady. "Not with a sword, but with poison. The priest dripped it into my mouth, saying it would bind my spirit for their use. I tasted the bitterness and fought to stay awake, but I could not. My eyes closed, and the world went dark." Amora's gaze hardened. At the same time, the priest poisoned the old king. They believed no one would suspect them if both deaths happened at once. She shook her head, as if brushing away a dark memory. When the old king died, Chukwuma stepped forward to claim the throne. The priest placed the crown upon his head, and just like that, Chukwuma became king. Maduka felt cold sweat trickle down his spine. He thought of the elders who once guided the village, their careful deliberations under the mango tree. Now, under Chukwuma's rule, fear ruled instead of justice. No one dared speak against their new king, who smiled in council and ruled with hidden cruelty. Amora's voice turned gentle. "Every villager knows the story, though they dare not speak it. They say I was taken by spirits, or that I ran away. But the truth lies here, in the shadows." She gestured toward Maduka's chest, as if pointing to the pain he felt inside. "That is why I have come to you." Maduka's breath caught. He remembered the moonlit road, the broken gourd, and the empty eyes of the silent messenger. Now her story made everything clear. This was no wandering ghost, she was a victim crying out for justice. "I know you are afraid," Amora said. "But if no one speaks, my voice will fade, and my death will be forgotten. You have heard the night's truth. Will you carry it into the light?" Maduka closed his eyes, gathering courage from the rising sun. He felt Amora's resolve strengthen his own. Though his hand shook, he nodded. The weight of her words settled in his heart. "Yes," he whispered. "I will speak." Amora's lips curved in a small, hopeful smile, her first sign of peace since that moonlit murder. The air grew warm again, and for a moment, Maduka felt as if the river's gentle flow had returned, carrying with it the promise of justice yet to come. Maduka stood at the edge of his courtyard, his heart pounding like a drum. The early sun had barely warmed the earth, but already the air felt heavy with judgment. He tried to shake his head and clear his thoughts, thinking of Amora's plea for help. Yet every time he opened his mouth, his voice cracked and he could not speak the words he needed. His wife, Nkechi, appeared in the doorway, her arms crossed and her face stern. She had finished her morning chores and now faced him with tired eyes. "Have you eaten?" she asked, though her tone was sharp. Before Maduka could answer, she spoke again. "You argue with spirits while you starve your family. Useless man! When will you learn to take life seriously?" Maduka's cheeks burned with shame. He opened his mouth to explain, but the words tangled on his tongue. He forced out a low grunt and turned away. He felt the weight of his wife's disappointment settle on his shoulders like a heavy load. As Nkechi returned to her work inside, Maduka took a few faltering steps out toward the village path. The memory of Amora's pale face filled his mind, and he fought the urge to run. But before he could set off, he heard voices behind him, low murmurs that grew louder. "Maduka is talking to himself," someone whispered. "Has the moon finally driven him mad?" Another voice chimed in, "He stands there, arms flailing at nothing. It's embarrassing." Maduka froze, every drop of courage draining away. He turned to see a small crowd gathered near the gate, women carrying yams in woven baskets, children clutching clay pots of water, and a few men leaning on their walking sticks. All of them stared at him with pity or amusement. The laughter in their eyes stabbed at his heart. He tried to step forward, to reach out and show them Amora, to make them believe. But his legs would not move. Fear rooted him to the spot. Sweat trickled down his temples, and his palms grew damp. Suddenly, Elder Okeke emerged from the group, his tall staff tapping the ground with each steady step. The elder's face was lined with age and wisdom, but his eyes held no warmth today. He stopped a few feet from Maduka and raised his voice so all could hear. "Palm wine too early, Maduka." Elder Okeke chided, his tone both amused and reproachful. It is barely midday, and here you stand, speaking to the dust. Come now, man, you are better than this. Maduka's face burned hotter than fire. He felt as small as a child caught stealing fruit. He bowed his head, unable to meet the elder's gaze. He mumbled something in apology, but the words sounded hollow even to his own ears. Get some sense back in your head, Elder Okeke added. When you're ready to join the living, come and speak with us. With a final tap of his staff, the elder turned and walked away. The villagers followed him, whispering and shaking their heads. Maduka watched them go, each step they took widening the gap between their world and his. Shame and fear overwhelmed him. He needed to hide, to escape the stares and the whispers. Without another thought, he turned and stumbled down the sunlit path toward the roadside joint. There, beneath the shade of a broad mango tree, red barrels waited like old friends, and small wooden stools offered brief refuge from his own mind. He sank onto a stool, the rough wood biting into his damp clothes. The vendor nodded at him sympathetically and poured a cup of fresh palm wine. Maduka took the cup in trembling hands and lifted it to his lips. The first swallow burned hot and bitter, but he welcomed the sting. It made him feel alive again, even if only for a moment. As he drank, the fear began to dull. The ghosts of his shame and of Amora's face receded into the background, pushed away by the warmth of the wine. Around him, ordinary life continued. Women haggled over produce, goats bleated from their pens, and the breeze carried the mixed scents of earth and wood smoke. For now, Maduka thought, he could pretend nothing had changed. He could sit here and lose himself in the simple comfort of palm wine. But even as he raised the cup to his lips once more, a small voice inside him whispered that this refuge would not last. The ghost's voice would return, and with it, the truth he could not ignore. News reached Maduka just after sunrise. A traveling trader, passing through the village, brought word that Chukwuma's guards had marched onto the small plot of land Maduka had inherited from his late father. Without warning or apology, they had hammered a wooden sign into the earth. Bold letters read, "King's property. All others keep off." Maduka's heart pounded. He remembered the land as it had been in his childhood, rows of maize reaching toward the sun, the tall stalks whispering in the breeze. It was the only piece of earth his family still owned. His father had worked that land until his dying day, and now the boy-turned-king claimed it for himself. Anger flared in Maduka's chest. He stomped out his hut's doorway, sweat prickling on his brow. Villagers hurried past, giving him wide berth. They had learned to fear Chukwuma's guards. Maduka ignored their anxious stares and hurried down the path to the field. When he reached it, he saw the sign and the footprints of booted soldiers pressed deep into the soft soil. The land lay bare, as if mourning. Maduka dropped his walking stick and wrenched the sign from its post. He crushed the wood in his hands until it splintered, then tossed the pieces into the tall grass. In a rough whisper, he muttered, "This is mine." That night, long after the village lights blinked out, Maduka lay on his simple reed mat, restless. Rain had fallen earlier, and the air smelled of wet earth. The memory of the sign drifted through his mind, stoking his anger. Outside, the river gurgled softly, reminding him of Amora and her promise of justice. He thought of standing before the council of elders, telling them the truth. But fear had always held him back. Before he could drift into sleep, the sharp crack of a distant whip tore through the night. Maduka bolted upright, his chest tight. Heavy footsteps approached his compound. The guards had come for him. They burst through the broken gate, torches in hand. 6 of them, their faces set in hard lines. They grabbed him by the arms, pulling him into the muddy yard. Maduka tried to struggle, but the guards were strong. One shoved him to the ground. The wet earth seeped into his clothes. "Thought you owned the king's land, eh?" the leader sneered. He raised his whip and struck Maduka across the back. Pain exploded through his ribs and he gasped, tasting blood. Before he could catch his breath, another lash fell. Breath rattled in Maduka's chest as blow after blow landed. His ribs felt as if they would shatter. He rolled onto his side, curling into a ball, unable to protect himself. Each strike sent hot spikes of pain through his body. When the beating finally stopped, Maduka lay on the ground, drenched in sweat and mud, bruises blooming across his back. The guards stood over him, their torches flickering in the darkness. "Next time," the leader growled, leaning close, "you die." With that, they shoved him into the grass and disappeared into the night, leaving only echoes of their footsteps. Maduka lay motionless, the cold rain beginning to fall again, mixing with his tears. Morning came in pale grey light. Maduka awoke stiff and sore. His back felt as if it carried stones. He looked up to see Nkechi standing at the doorway, her eyes wide with worry. Without a word, she rushed to him and knelt beside his pallet. She poured warm water over a cloth and gently washed the dried blood and mud from his wounds. Her fingers trembled as she dabbed at the worst cuts. Maduka closed his eyes, wishing he could look away from her pity. When she finished, she sat back on her heels, regarding him with a mixture of love and sorrow. Maduka swallowed hard, ashamed that his actions had brought such pain upon himself and worry upon her. At that moment, the shadow of a pale figure drifted into view behind Nkechi. Amora stood in the doorway, silent as ever. Her sorrowful eyes met Maduka's for a brief instant. He raised a trembling hand in greeting, then lowered it again. He did not yet have words for her, or for the fury burning in his chest. But as the rain pattered softly on the roof, Maduka made a silent vow. He would find a way to stand against the king's cruelty, no matter the cost. Before dawn broke, Maduka sat on the cool earthen floor of his hut, restless and afraid. His back still throbbed from the guard's cruel beating. Outside, the first birds were stirring, but he closed his eyes against the day. Suddenly, a pale light filled the doorway. There stood Amora, her form soft and shimmering like mist over the river. "Maduka," she whispered, gliding forward. "I have a way to free me." He rose unsteadily and nodded. Amora pointed toward the stream at the edge of the village. "The bottle that holds my bound spirit is hidden in the chief priest's shrine by the water. It is a dark glass bottle, tied shut with a red cloth." Maduka's heart pounded. "How will I find it?" he asked. Amora's eyes were filled with hope. "Go before the cock crows," she said. "Take a fresh palm frond, 3 leaves from the tree by your hut. Place 1 leaf across your lips, tie another around your head, and fasten the 3rd around your arms. Speak to no one. I will walk behind you, guiding your steps." He felt the fear in his chest, but also a fierce resolve. "And then," he whispered. "When you see the bottle," Amora continued, "remove the leaf from your mouth and strike it against the bottle 3 times. The seal will break." She paused, voice soft but clear, "Then carry the bottle out of the shrine and open it. Smoke-like vapor will pour out, and my spirit will be free." Maduka trembled but bowed. "I will do it." Amora gave him a gentle smile. "Hurry now. The rooster will sing soon." Stepping outside, he found the tall palm tree, its fronds still heavy with dew. With shaking hands, he snapped off 3 long leaves. The first he held between his teeth so his lips closed around its base. The second he tied around his forehead, the green frond resting across his brow. The third he wound tightly around his upper arms, its moisture cooling his skin. Silently, he began toward the stream. The village lay quiet, with only a few lamps still glowing in the huts. He moved through the tall grass, each footstep soft on the wet earth. Just beyond a bend in the reeds, he saw the small shrine, a simple wooden hut draped in old cloths. The door was closed. Maduka pushed it open and slipped inside. The shrine was cool and dim. Shadows danced on the walls from his small lantern. There, on a low wooden shelf, stood the dark glass bottle, sealed with the red cloth. Amora's pale voice came from behind him, "Now." Maduka removed the leaf from his mouth and lifted the bottle. He struck the bottle against the wooden shelf once. Nothing happened. He struck it a second time. Still nothing. His heart pounded so loudly he thought it would burst. Sweat dripped into his eyes. Then, with every ounce of courage, he struck the bottle a 3rd time. The seal shattered with a sharp crack. He lifted the bottle toward the open doorway. As soon as he stepped outside, he untied the cloth, opened the cap, and a swirl of pale vapor poured out. It rose in twisting ribbons, glowing faintly in the dawn light. Amora's form shimmered in the mist, her spirit free at last. Maduka lowered the bottle, tears in his eyes. The thin green frond slipped from his sweaty hands. In that breath of vapor, he felt the weight of fear lift and a promise of justice begin to grow. "You have freed me," she whispered, her voice like water over smooth stones. "Thank you, Maduka." Her arms moved as if she wanted to touch him, but she remained gentle and light, almost weightless in the dawn's glow. As the vapor drifted upward, the air grew still. Maduka felt a surge of hope fill his chest. He could almost taste the promise of justice that had felt so far away just days before. The bottle lay empty on the shelf, its purpose complete. Amora stepped closer. "Wait for morning," she said softly. "When the sun rises, I will strike the priest and the king with the truth. Justice will be served. Then my spirit can rest." Maduka nodded, tears brimming in his eyes. His body ached from fear and from the journey, but his heart felt strong. "I will be here," he promised, voice firm despite the tremble. Amora's form began to fade back into silver mist. "Thank you," she repeated, a bright echo in the silent shrine. Then, as the first pale light of dawn slipped through the doorway, she vanished entirely, leaving only the faintest shimmer in the air. Before dawn's first light could warm the village, a chill swept through the chief priest's shrine. The old doors swung open on their own, and Amora's silver form drifted inside. The priest knelt at his altar, murmuring prayers over fetishes and beads, certain that his spirit magic still held power. He did not hear her approach. With a whisper like the river's current, Amora reached out. The priest felt a sudden cold touch on his shoulder. He turned, eyes wide, as her pale face emerged from the mist. His prayer beads slipped from his trembling fingers and clattered to the stone floor. "Why do you disturb me?" he croaked, voice shaking. Amora's eyes burned brighter than the lanterns. "You bound me here with poison and blood," she said softly. "Tonight, your power ends." He tried to speak, but his throat closed. Panic rose in his chest as the mist curled around him. Then, with no more sound than a sigh, his body went still. Amora's gaze softened for a moment as his spirit slipped away, freed from its cruel lies. She faded from the shrine like a wisp of smoke, leaving behind only an empty lantern and the faint scent of wet clay. That same night, high in the palace, King Chukwuma slept in his fine canopy bed. Guards stood watch by the doors, eyes closed and armor gleaming in torchlight. The king dreamed of new lands and new subjects, unaware that the ghost he had wronged was coming for him. Amora entered the room silently. The guards did not stir, the mist that cloaked her passed harmlessly around their armor. She drifted toward the king's bed, where Chukwuma lay breathing deeply. His chest rose and fell in the steady rhythm of sleep. At first, she murmured to him, filling his mind with strange visions, his robes turned to rags, his crown melting in his hands, his people's eyes filled with fear instead of respect. The images swirled until his sleep became a nightmare. He thrashed and cried out in terror, beholden to a madness that had no mercy. Then, in the darkness, Amora's hand found his heart. Her touch was cold as the grave, and the madness fled. The king's eyes snapped open, wide with panic, but his strength failed him. With a last, choking gasp, Chukwuma collapsed, his reign of terror ended by the very spirit he had tried to enslave. Before the first rooster crow, the villagers gathered in the square. Word had spread like wildfire. Both the priest and the king lay dead by the river's edge and in the palace. Fear and curiosity drew them out of their huts and into the dawn's dim light. There, in the center of the square, stood Amora's glowing form. Her silver light illuminated the wooden platform where the elders once met. The villagers fell silent as she raised her hand, pointing toward the palace steps. From beyond the crowd, a trembling figure was carried forward on a litter of cloth, the dying king. Chukwuma's voice strained as he gasped out his final words. The villagers leaned in, stunned. I killed her," he whispered, voice weak. "The priest and I, we took her life for power." His eyes found Maduka in the crowd, and he pointed a shaking finger. Maduka helped her. Then, with one last breath, he died. A hush fell over the square. The morning air felt thick with wonder and relief. Then, as if released from a great weight, the villagers burst into cheers. They lifted Maduka from the back of the crowd and hoisted him onto their shoulders. Women clapped their hands and sang songs of praise. Men stamped their feet and shouted his name. Children danced around him, their faces bright with joy. Maduka wept, overwhelmed by the turn of events. His rough hands covered his face as tears ran down his cheeks. Amora watched from the platform, her form softening into a gentle glow. She offered him a final, thankful smile, then faded with the rising sun. The square rang with laughter and song as the people celebrated their freedom. Maduka's heart swelled with both pride and sorrow. He had helped free Amora's spirit and topple a tyrant, but he also saw the cost, 2 lives lost, and the weight of what he had done resting heavy on his soul. As the new day blossomed, Maduka stood in the middle of the square, the villagers' cheers still echoing around him. He closed his eyes, feeling Amora's promise settled deep in his heart. Justice had been served, and a restless spirit could finally rest. That evening, Maduka sat on the wooden stool outside his hut, the warm glow of the setting sun painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. He still wore the faded cloth tied around his forehead and arms from that dawn by the stream, but now those palm fronds seemed like badges of honor rather than marks of fear. Around him, the village settled into quiet, the hens clucked softly in their pens, and the river whispered gently as it flowed past. Suddenly, a soft light appeared at the doorway. Maduka's heart skipped a beat as Amora's pale form emerged from the last rays of dusk. She floated toward him, her edges shimmering like mist in the evening air. "Maduka," she said, her voice as calm as the river at dawn. He stood slowly, wiping his tears with the back of his hand. "Amora," he whispered, bowing his head in respect. His throat felt tight, but his heart overflowed with relief. She lifted a slender hand and pointed toward the distant path that led to his small field, now returned to him by the elders. "Your land is restored," she said, her voice carrying a gentle strength. "The soil will yield good crops again. Tell the villagers to plant maize and yams in the first rains." Maduka nodded, imagining the green shoots pushing through the earth, bringing food and life back to his family. Amora smiled and continued, "Your wife will conceive. A child will bring laughter back into your home." She placed a pale hand on his shoulder, and he felt a warmth spread through his chest, a promise of new beginnings. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words stuck in his throat. He could only nod again. "Promise me one more thing," Amora said, her eyes soft but firm. "Promise me you will stop drinking. Let the wine no longer rule your days. Your spirit, too, must be free." Maduka's tears fell more freely now. He knelt before her, pressing his forehead to the earth. "I promise," he said, voice clear and steady. "I will never touch palm wine again, except to share with friends on happy days." At his words, Amora's form brightened. She leaned down and brushed his hair back from his brow, a tender gesture that felt like the wind on the river. "Thank you, my friend," she whispered. "From today, you will not see me again. I have had my revenge, and my spirit can rest." She stepped back into the fading light, and Maduka watched as she dissolved into a single silver ray before disappearing entirely. The hush that followed felt sacred, as if the village itself was holding its breath. Weeks passed. Each morning, Maduka rose before the roosters crow and walked to his field. He tilled the soil, planting seeds by hand, remembering Amora's promise with every turn of the earth. The villagers greeted him with respectful nods, no longer seeing him as the drunken fool but as the man who had freed a spirit and brought down a tyrant. One afternoon, a messenger arrived from the city. He carried a sealed letter stamped with the company's emblem. Maduka tore it open with trembling hands. Inside was an offer. His position was restored, with full pay for the months he had been away. His heart swelled. He ran to Oni, the village elder, and read the letter aloud beneath the mango tree. The villagers cheered, slapping his back and clapping his hands in celebration. That same week, Nkechi announced that she was with child. Her laughter, bright and unburdened, filled their hut. Maduka held her close, feeling hope bloom in his chest. At dawn on the day they left, the village gathered to bid them farewell. Children waved woven mats, and the elders blessed their journey. Maduka carried only a small bundle of clothes and the few keepsakes he treasured, the broken red cloth from the bottle and a smooth river stone Amora had left behind. As their caravan walked beneath the rising sun, Maduka felt peace flow through his bones. The path ahead was unknown, but his heart was light. Behind him lay the land of ghosts and vengeance. Before him stretched a future of love, family, and honest work. And in that bright morning light, Maduka knew he would never forget the girl who taught him that true strength comes from keeping one's promise, and that even the quietest spirit can echo through the ages. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe to this channel.